It was supposed to be just another ordinary Sunday when my granddaughter, Lily, secretly slid a piece of paper under the dining table. My hands trembled as I read, "Grandma, call the police right now. Please don't let them know I said anything." My heart skipped a beat. Mark, my son, was pouring wine with a smile that never reached his eyes. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, raised her glass to give a toast that sounded like it had been rehearsed a dozen times. And me, Sandra Miller, 68 years old, had just received the most terrifying note of my life from an 8-year-old girl. What on earth was happening inside my own suburban Texas home? 3 weeks earlier, it had all begun with a conversation that forever changed the atmosphere of our family. That afternoon, Mark arrived with Jessica, but without Lily. That alone struck me as odd. They always brought her over every Sunday, but this time, their faces carried a seriousness that made me wary the moment they walked through the door. "Mom, we need to talk to you," Mark said, avoiding my eyes as he sat on the sofa. Jessica remained standing, as if ready to step into a fight. "It's about the house, and about your future." Robert, my husband, had just stepped out to buy the newspaper. It was as if they had timed it perfectly so only I would be home. I sat across from them, feeling the air in the room thicken and grow heavy. "My future?" I asked, though my gut already told me nothing good was coming. "You're 68 now," Mark began, finally forcing himself to look at me. "This house is too big for you and Dad. You can't take care of it like before." All lies. Robert and I still kept up the house perfectly. Garden tidy, walls freshly painted, every corner spotless. But I let him speak. "Jessica and I have been thinking," he continued, holding his wife's hand. "It would be best if you transferred this house to us now as an early inheritance. That way, you could move to a smaller, more comfortable place for your age." The brazenness of his words hit me like a slap. 40 years. Robert had worked himself to the bone at the machine shop to pay for this house. 40 years of waking at 5 a.m., saving every penny so Mark could go to school, have decent clothes, never want for anything. "An early inheritance," I repeated slowly. "Mark, this house isn't just property. It's our home. It's where we raised your sister, Linda, where we celebrated birthdays, where—" "Don't get sentimental, Mom." Jessica cut me off with a cold smile. "It's just a house. And frankly, you're both too old to keep up a place this big. It would be more responsible if you thought of us and of Lily's future." There it was, the same old card. My granddaughter, as if I didn't think of Lily every second of every day. As if I wasn't the one who bought her school supplies when they were broke, sewed her costumes for school plays, took care of her when she was sick while they worked. "We're in debt, Mom," Mark confessed, lowering his voice. "A big debt. If we don't pay it soon, we'll lose everything. And Lily, she doesn't deserve that." My son wasn't begging. He was demanding I hand over the house, my life's work, and using my granddaughter to pressure me. "What kind of debt?" I asked. From the way Mark avoided my gaze, I could already guess something bad. "It doesn't matter." Jessica jumped in. "What matters is everything will be fixed if you help, if you give us the house." "No," I said firmly. "This house will not be sold, and it will certainly not be given away to pay off debts you don't even have the guts to admit." Jessica's face changed entirely. The polite mask fell away like a dress ripped at the seams. "Sandra, I don't think you understand how serious this is. We're not asking. We're telling you what's going to happen." "Excuse me, what?" Up, feeling my blood boil. "Listen, old lady," Jessica spat, the words dripping like venom. "You're old. Robert's old. Any moment now you could need special care. Then you'll be too far gone to make your own decisions. Isn't it better to handle everything peacefully right now?" Mark said nothing. My own son stayed silent, while his wife threatened me in my own living room. In that moment, I realized I had lost my son long ago. Get out, I said, in a voice I barely recognized as mine. Get out of my house. Now. Mom, Mark started. And don't come back until you're ready to apologize and tell the truth about those debts. They slammed the door so hard, the glass rattled. Robert came home 10 minutes later to find me crying on the sofa, though I couldn't tell if it was from anger or sorrow. I told him everything. Robert was silent for a long time, trying to process the betrayal of our son. Finally, he took my hand and said, Sandra, I have a feeling this isn't over yet. He was right, because 3 weeks later, Mark and Jessica showed up at my door again, bringing Lily along, wearing fake smiles as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't threatened me, as if they hadn't tried to steal the house. And now, with Lily's note trembling in my hand, I knew Robert had been right. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. Are you okay, Mom? Mark asked from across the table, his voice unusually tense. I quickly folded Lily's note and tucked it into the pocket of my green dress, forcing a calm expression. My granddaughter looked at me with wide, fearful eyes, but when Mark turned his gaze on her, she immediately dropped her head toward her plate. Of course, son, I replied with a strained smile. I was just thinking how delicious Jessica's cooking is. Jessica smiled, but there was something calculating in it that made me uneasy. Thank you, Sandra. I wanted this lunch to feel special, like family, like the old days. The old days. She meant before she dared threaten me in my own living room, before she and Mark plotted to take my house. But I kept my composure. Something was terribly wrong here, and Lily's note was proof of it. Robert calmly chewed his roasted chicken, oblivious to the tension. My husband was always the steady one, sometimes too trusting, so he likely didn't notice the stiffness in Mark's eyes, the way Jessica controlled every move at the table, or the fact that Lily barely touched her food. Lily, sweetheart, aren't you hungry? I asked, trying to keep my tone natural. No, not really, Grandma, she whispered, without lifting her head. That's fine, Jessica cut in quickly. Kids aren't always hungry, right, Lily? The little girl nodded, but I saw her small hands trembling. My heart pounded. What had they done to her? What did she know that I didn't? For the next several minutes, I pretended everything was normal while watching every detail. Mark got up and went into the kitchen 3 times for pointless reasons. More water, napkins we already had, salt no one needed. Each time he came back, he exchanged glances with Jessica. You know, Mom, Mark said on his 4th return. Jessica and I have been thinking about our last conversation. So it began, whatever they were planning was in motion. Is that so? I answered, taking a sip of water. The liquid tasted strange, faintly bitter, but I told myself it might just be my nerves. Yes, Jessica chimed in, placing her hand on Mark's like it had been rehearsed. We realized we may have been too blunt, too harsh with you. We want to apologize, Mark added. For a moment, I almost believed him. Almost. We understand this house means a lot to you, Jessica went on. We don't want to pressure you into making a quick decision. A blatant lie. Lily's note felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket, proof of something terrible happening right before my eyes. But I kept playing my part. Thank you for understanding, I said carefully. That's why. Mark continued. We think maybe you could come have lunch with us more often, so the family can spend more time together. Yes, Jessica added with fake enthusiasm. Every Sunday even. Lily would love that, wouldn't you, sweetheart? The child nodded weakly, but when her parents weren't looking, she shot me a desperate glance that nearly broke my heart. I took another sip of water. This time the bitterness was unmistakable. Something was wrong with my glass. Very wrong. I set it down and pretended to keep eating, though my mind was racing. Are you feeling okay, Mom? Mark asked, and in his tone there wasn't concern but anticipation. I'm a little tired, I admitted, and truthfully, I was. Suddenly my body felt oddly heavy, as if my thoughts were being dragged through honey. Maybe you should lie down for a while, Jessica suggested immediately. After lunch, okay? Of course. Yes, Mark agreed. You've been working in the garden too much. It might be a bit too much for someone your age. I cut him off, finishing the part he hesitated over. My tone was sharp enough to make them wary. I didn't mean it like that, Mark stammered. But I understood now. The bitter taste in the water, the forced invitations to lunch, the uneasy glances, the desperate note from Lily. It was all clear. They were drugging me. Right here in my own home, right in front of Robert and my granddaughter. They were quietly poisoning me. Excuse me, I said, rising slowly. I need to use the bathroom. In the bathroom, I pulled out Lily's note and read it again. Grandma, call the police right now. But what would I say? That my son and daughter-in-law were drugging me? What proof did I have? Would anyone believe me? Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw my pupils wider than normal. There was definitely something in the water. But I had to be smart. If I confronted them now without evidence, they'd deny everything. And if they were truly poisoning me, what else were they planning next? I walked back to the table, forcing myself to move normally even though my legs trembled like jelly. Are you okay, Grandma? Lily asked, fear shining in her eyes, making me realize how serious this was. I'm fine, sweetheart, I whispered back, giving her a small wink. I hoped she understood I'd received her warning. Robert continued eating, completely unaware. He drank from his own glass without any problem, which meant they were only spiking mine. Mark and Jessica exchanged glances again, thinking I didn't notice. Mom, Mark suddenly said, you've been forgetting things lately, haven't you? That question was like a bucket of cold water thrown over me. I'm sorry. What did you say? Well, Jessica chimed in. On the phone the other day, you sounded confused, like you couldn't remember what we'd talked about. A blatant lie. I remembered every cruel word they'd said, but now I understood their plan. And Robert has mentioned, Mark continued, that sometimes you wander around at night and don't remember why. Robert had never said that because it had never happened. But I saw my husband glance at me, clearly confused by stories he'd never told. I don't remember saying that, Robert murmured. Oh, but that's normal. Jessica jumped in quickly. Older people don't always notice the small changes. It happens gradually. They were building a narrative, painting me as a confused, forgetful woman in need of special care, and they'd likely been planning this for weeks. Maybe you should see a doctor, Mark suggested in a tone of fake concern, just to make sure everything's okay. A geriatric specialist, Jessica added. We know someone very good, very understanding of sensitive situations. A doctor who had probably been paid off, or at least willing to diagnose dementia based solely on their word. Their plan grew clearer with every second. Mom, are you listening to me? Mark asked. And I realized I'd been silent too long. Yes, son, I answered, trying to make my voice sound a little confused. I'm sorry. I got distracted. What were you saying about a doctor? Jessica smiled triumphantly. Mark sighed with relief. They thought their plan was working, but I understood everything. They were drugging me to make me seem senile. They would record my confused behavior at family lunches, gather witnesses to confirm my supposed memory loss, and with the help of a crooked geriatric doctor, they would declare me incompetent to manage my own property. The house would become theirs, and I'd end up in a nursing home, drugged and silenced, while they enjoyed the fruits of Robert's and my 40 years of hard work. But they'd forgotten one thing. Lily, my brave granddaughter, had discovered the plan and risked everything to warn me. Now I had to be smarter than them. The rest of lunch felt like a play. I pretended to grow more and more confused. I deliberately dropped my fork twice, repeated the same question over and over. Mark and Jessica looked at each other in satisfaction each time I acted lost. Robert, my poor Robert, began to truly worry. Sandra, are you sure you're feeling okay? He asked, touching my forehead. You look a little pale. I'm fine, honey, I answered, letting my voice tremble slightly. Just a little tired. See, Dad? Mark said in that condescending tone he'd perfected over the past few weeks. That's why we're worried. Mom's been different lately. Jessica nodded, her face full of fake concern. Robert, I've noticed it too. The last few times Sandra seemed really confused, like she couldn't remember conversations that had just happened. My husband looked at me, his eyes full of love and worry. I hated lying to him. I hated making him believe something was wrong with me, but I needed more time to understand Mark and Jessica's full plan. Maybe we should call Dr. Adams, Robert suggested. He's been our doctor for 20 years. No, absolutely not, Jessica cut in immediately. Dr. Adams is too old. With issues this specialized, we need someone more up to date, a real expert. We know Dr. Victor Mendonca, Mark added. He's the best geriatric doctor in the city. Very dedicated, very professional. The very doctor they'd bribed. The one ready to hand out a fake dementia diagnosis in exchange for money or favors. We can make an appointment for next week, Jessica continued, so he can evaluate Mrs. Sandra and put everyone's mind at ease. Lily stayed silent through the whole conversation, but I could feel her eyes on me from across the table. While her parents talked to Robert about doctors and symptoms, my granddaughter mouthed 2 words at me. Be careful. My heart filled with both pride and fear. This 8-year-old child was risking everything to protect me, and I had to be worthy of her courage. I think that's a good idea, I finally said, shocking them all. If you believe I should see a doctor, I'll trust your arrangement. The victorious smile that flickered across Jessica's face was terrifying. Mark relaxed completely, certain their plan was working. Perfect, Mom, he said, taking my hand with a fake tenderness that made me sick. We'll schedule it tomorrow. After lunch, they insisted I go rest while they cleared the table. Robert went into his office to read the paper, while I pretended to head to my room but instead stood silently in the hallway, listening. See? She's starting to fall for it, Jessica whispered. Completely, Mark replied softly. Did you see her at lunch? Confused, lost, perfect. What about Robert? Robert's nothing, Mark said. He loves Mom too much. He'll do anything he thinks is good for her. Once Mendonca confirms the diagnosis, Robert will sign any paper we put in front of him. Are you sure Mendonca will go along with $50,000 and the promise of being our family doctor once we control all her assets? Jessica asked. Mendonca will sign whatever we need, Mark said firmly. My blood ran cold. Not only were they drugging and manipulating me, they were bribing a doctor to falsify a medical diagnosis. This was even worse than I had feared. What about Lily? Jessica asked. She was so quiet today. She's just a kid, Mark answered dismissively. She doesn't understand anything. And even if she did, who would believe her? I wanted to scream at those monsters that my granddaughter understood perfectly well that she was smarter and braver than both of them combined. But I held back. I needed more information. How long do you think it'll take? Jessica asked. A month, maybe 2 at most, Mark replied. First comes the diagnosis, then the observation phase, where we'll record her decline, and finally, we'll get the declaration of incompetence. Once we have legal guardianship, we can sell the house and pay off the debts. What if Robert resists? 1. He's old, he's tired. Once he believes Mom needs special care, it'll be easy to convince him that putting her in a nursing home is for the best, especially once the violent episodes start. Violent episodes? Jessica asked curiously. A stronger sedative will make her act strangely, aggressive, even dangerous to herself and others. Robert will be so scared he'll beg us to commit her. I bit my lip hard to keep from screaming. They were planning to drug me until I became a shadow of myself, then use those drug-induced changes as proof to lock me away. All so they could steal the house and cover debts, probably from gambling or some stupid investments. This is a perfect plan, Jessica whispered. We'll have the house, the debts paid, and we'll start fresh. Lily will have a better life without the unpredictability of some senile old woman. A senile old woman. That's how they saw me. After everything I'd sacrificed for Mark, after all the years I worked so he could have a good life, I was now nothing but an obstacle to their happiness. Hearing footsteps in the hallway, I hurried back to the bedroom and sat down, trembling not from the drugs, but from rage and fear. I had to do something. But what? If I confronted them now, they'd deny everything. If I called the police, what would I say? That my own son was drugging me, based on the bitter taste in a glass and a note from an 8-year-old girl? I needed proof, undeniable evidence, and I had to protect Lily, that brave little girl who had already risked so much to save me. Footsteps came closer. Someone was approaching my room. I quickly lay down and shut my eyes, pretending to sleep. She's out, Jessica whispered. Looks like it, Mark replied. The sedative's working. The camera? Right here, Mark whispered. Record when I ask her questions. We need footage of her confusion for Dr. Mendonca. I cracked one eye open just enough to see Mark holding up his phone, clearly recording. Jessica stood beside him, watching. Mom, Mark said loudly, pretending to sound surprised. You're awake? I slowly opened my eyes, as if just coming out of a deep sleep. Mark, what time is it? 4 p.m., Mom. Triumphant glance. The camera was still recording. Just an hour ago, Mom. Jessica cooked chicken. Lily was here too. You don't remember? Lily? I repeated slowly. She was here? Yes, Mom. She ate with us. We even talked about taking you to see a doctor. Don't you remember? I shook my head, acting completely bewildered. No, I don't remember. Why would I need to see a doctor? Because you keep forgetting things, Mom. Like right now. You've been so mixed up lately. I let tears spill down my cheeks, real tears, because even though I was pretending, the pain and betrayal were very real. I don't understand. What's happening to me? I whispered. Don't worry, Mom, Mark said. His voice was so gentle that for a split second, I almost forgot it was all part of a cruel performance. We'll take care of you. The doctor will help us understand what's happening. Jessica nodded solemnly from behind the camera. They were building the perfect case for my fabricated mental decline. Get some more rest, Mom, Mark suggested. When you wake up, maybe you'll feel better. They left the room, closing the door softly. I heard them whispering in the hallway about how good the footage was, about how impressed Dr. Mendonca would be with this evidence. I lay there, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the whole house could hear it. Now, I had the proof I needed, but I had to be more careful than ever. One mistake and I'd end up exactly where they wanted me. Drugged, silenced, and locked away, while they enjoyed everything Robert and I had worked for all our lives. That night, after Mark and Jessica left with Lily, I waited until Robert was sound asleep before putting my plan into action. My husband snored softly beside me, completely unaware of the danger creeping into our lives. I slipped out of bed like a shadow. The first thing I did was check the glass of water I'd drunk from at lunch. I had secretly hidden it in the kitchen cabinet when I pretended to tidy up. Under the moonlight streaming through the window, I examined the bottom. There was a faint layer of white residue, like undissolved powder. I took a small plastic bag and carefully scraped the powder inside. It wasn't much, but it might be enough for a lab to analyze what they had given me. I tucked the bag deep inside my jewelry box, behind the strand of pearls my mother had left me. Then I went into the study and pulled out an old phone Robert had been nagging me to replace. I never thought I'd be grateful for holding on to something so outdated. But that night, it felt like my lifeline. I searched for information on Dr. Victor Mendonca. What I found made my blood run cold. In the past 5 years, he had been disciplined 3 times by the state medical board. Once for billing for services never performed, once for misdiagnosing conditions that didn't exist, and once for prescribing drugs without medical justification. He was exactly the kind of corrupt doctor Mark and Jessica needed for their scheme. But there was something even more chilling. I found a 2-year-old article about a lawsuit accusing Mendonca of falsely diagnosing dementia in a father so one child could seize the entire inheritance. The case had been dismissed for lack of evidence, but the details were horrifying. It was exactly what they were trying to do to me. I took screenshots of everything and stored them in a new folder on the phone. Then I researched secret recordings and their legality. I discovered that in our state, a person could legally record a conversation they were part of without needing the other party's consent. That meant if I could capture Mark and Jessica admitting their plan, it would be admissible evidence in court. I also researched labs that could analyze unknown substances without a doctor's order. There were 2 private forensic labs in the city that offered toxicology analysis. One promised results within 48 hours with absolute accuracy. The next step would be riskier. I needed access to Mark's phone to retrieve the recording he had made of me, acting confused. I remembered he usually charged it in the kitchen when visiting, plugged into the charger Robert and I had bought for him. But that would have to wait until their next visit. For now, I needed to focus on recording everything. I typed up a detailed letter describing the entire situation. The first argument about the house, the vague threats, today's lunch, the drugged water, the overheard conversation, and the recording of my staged confusion. I signed it and locked it in the safe with our important documents. I also wrote another letter to my lawyer, Charles Rivera, explaining everything and asking him to review the will and power of attorney. If anything happened to me, I wanted to make sure Robert was protected and Mark couldn't manipulate him. As I wrote, my mind worked non-stop, mapping out each step. I had to be careful. If Mark and Jessica suspected I knew, they might speed up their plan or even get violent. Lily had already risked too much to warn me, and I couldn't let her be in more danger. By 3 a.m., I finally returned to bed. Robert stirred, but didn't wake. I looked at him, my heart aching with love and guilt. My poor husband had no idea his own son had chosen to betray us in the cruelest way. On Monday morning, Mark called early, just as he'd promised. "Mom, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mendonca for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Can you make it?" "Yes, son," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "If you think it's necessary." "It is, Mom. After yesterday, Robert and I are really worried about you." Lies. But Mark was only calculating how much money he could squeeze out of the house. "Robert will come with me, won't he?" I asked. "Of course, Mom. We want him to feel comfortable with the doctor, too. After all, if you need special care, he'll be part of that decision." Special care. Their polite way of saying nursing home. "I understand, son. See you Wednesday." "Are you feeling well today?" "No more. Forgetting episodes, right?" forgetting episodes. They even had the medical jargon ready. I'm fine, Mark. Just a little tired. Good. Then get plenty of rest. And Mom, don't go out alone, okay? Just to be safe. Precaution? I asked. In case you get lost or forget your way. Just a safety measure. They were isolating me, limiting my freedom, slowly building the image of a woman who could no longer take care of herself. After hanging up, I told Robert I needed to go downtown for some errands. He looked worried because of the previous day's conversation and insisted on going with me. Robert, honey, I need to go alone. It's a women's matter. What women's matter? A gynecological checkup, I lied without blinking. Just a routine exam. Robert blushed and nodded. After 45 years of marriage, he still got embarrassed at the mention of women's health. My first stop was an independent forensic lab. A young receptionist with red-framed glasses greeted me with professionalism. Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you? I pulled out the small bag with the residue from the glass. I need this analyzed. I believe someone may have put something in my drink. The receptionist didn't look surprised. Surely she'd seen cases like this before. Do you have any idea what it might be? Something that causes confusion, drowsiness, memory loss. Probably a sedative. A full toxicology analysis costs $2,000 and results are ready within 48 hours. Do you need a formal report admissible for legal purposes? Yes, please. I filled out my full name, Sandra. I paid in cash and kept the receipt carefully. Within 48 hours, I would have scientific proof that I had been drugged. My second stop was the law office of Charles Rivera. I had known him for over 20 years. He had handled our home purchase, drafted our will, and taken care of many smaller matters. Sandra, what a surprise to see you. How are you and Robert? Charles, I need your help. This is very serious. I told him the entire story. Charles listened without interrupting, but I saw his face grow more tense with each detail. Sandra, what you're describing is very serious. These are multiple crimes: conspiracy to defraud, unlawful poisoning, conspiracy to falsify medical records. What can I do to protect myself? 1. What can I do to protect myself? First, we'll review the will and all power of attorney documents. We'll ensure that only Robert has medical decision-making authority, and only if you are truly incapacitated, confirmed by independent physicians. And if they try to declare me incompetent, with the evidence you're gathering, that will be nearly impossible. But we need more. Can you record their confessions? I'm already working on that. Charles handed me a small digital recorder, no bigger than a lipstick. It can record up to 8 hours continuously, very clear sound, and completely legal for you to use in conversations you're part of. He also gave me a business card with the number of a private investigator, Noemi Costa. If you need more support gathering evidence, she's the best. Very discreet, very professional. Leaving his office, I felt better prepared, yet more anxious. Wednesday's appointment with Dr. Mendonca would be the most dangerous moment. I had to appear confused enough not to arouse suspicion, but not so much that a fake diagnosis would seem credible. That evening, Robert and I ate in silence. He looked at me with deep worry, clearly influenced by Mark's claims about my confusion. Sandra, he finally asked, do you really not remember Sunday lunch? My heart sank. Robert was beginning to doubt my clarity, all because of our son's lies. Robert, honey, I said, taking his hand. In 45 years of marriage, have I ever lied to you? Never. Then believe me when I tell you something is very wrong. Mark and Jessica are hiding something from us. Robert looked into my eyes for a long time, then nodded. I believe you, Sandra. I'll always believe you. That was all I needed to hear. Whatever happened Wednesday, Robert would be on my side. The day of the appointment arrived like a storm we knew was coming. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Mark and Jessica showed up with fake smiles and neat clothes, trying to look reliable for the corrupt doctor. "Ready, Mom?" Mark asked, offering his hand as if I were a frail old woman in need of support. "Ready," I answered, making sure the recorder Charles had given me was tucked safely inside my jacket pocket. Robert walked beside me, silent but alert. Dr. Mendonca's office was on the 14th floor of an upscale medical building. The waiting room was lavish, with cream leather chairs and tables stacked with fashion magazines, everything designed to project success and trustworthiness. "Mrs. Sandra," Mark said to the receptionist. The older woman with perfectly styled hair and a professional smile replied, "Of course, Dr. Mendonca is expecting you." We were ushered into a spacious office, its walls lined with diplomas in glass frames. Mendonca, in his early 50s, with slicked-back gray hair and a smile that never reached his eyes, was exactly the type of man who would sell his conscience for money. "Mrs. Sandra, such a pleasure to meet you," he said, gripping my hand too tightly and holding it too long. "Your son has told me about the family's concerns." "Doctor," Mark jumped in. "As I mentioned over the phone, my mother has been having episodes of confusion, memory loss, disorientation." "I see, Doctor." Mendonca nodded, jotting notes. "How often do these episodes occur?" "More and more lately," Jessica lied. "Just this past Sunday, only an hour after lunch. She didn't even remember eating with us." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Doctor, I live with Sandra every day, and I've never seen anything like that." "That's common," Mendonca interrupted smoothly. "Those who live together daily often fail to notice gradual changes. It's usually those who see the person less often who detect the decline." How convenient. A perfect way to dismiss Robert's testimony. "Has the family recorded any of these episodes?" Mendonca asked Mark. "As a matter of fact, yes," Mark replied, pulling out his phone. "Just this past Sunday, I recorded her looking completely disoriented." My heart raced. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Mark played the video of me pretending to be confused after lunch. On the screen, I appeared lost, asking where I was, asking if Lily was there. My acting looked far too convincing. "As you can see, Doctor," Mark explained, "my mom couldn't remember anything about lunch just an hour earlier." "Very concerning," Mendonca muttered, jotting more notes. "Mrs. Sandra, do you remember when this video was recorded?" A trap question. If I said yes, it would contradict the evidence in the video. If I said no, it would confirm memory loss. "Not very clearly," I answered carefully. "I only remember being very tired that day. As for lunch, it's hazy, like through a fog." Mendonca nodded, satisfied. "We'll run a few simple cognitive tests." For the next 20 minutes, Mendonca asked me questions to test memory and orientation. I answered most correctly, but deliberately stumbled on a few dates and names, the sort of things someone with mild dementia might forget. "What day is today?" "Wednesday." "What date?" I hesitated. "March 15th. The 18th," he corrected. "What year is it?" 2024. "Do you remember what you ate this morning?" I pretended to think hard. "Ireven, coffee and toast." "Not entirely sure." Robert looked at me, his eyes full of genuine worry. I hated deceiving him, but I needed to make this act believable. When the test ended, Mendonca said he wanted to speak privately with Mark and Jessica. Robert and I were asked to wait in another room. "Sandra," Robert whispered, clutching my hand, "you really don't remember what you ate this morning? You had oatmeal with strawberries." "Robert, trust me," I whispered back. "It's going to be fine." Through the cracked door, I caught fragments of the conversation in the doctor's office. The symptoms are consistent with early dementia, progressive cognitive decline. I recommend a competency evaluation. Specialized care may be necessary. 10 minutes later, we were called back in. Mendonca kept a grave expression, as if rehearsed. Mrs. Sandra, based on my observation and the tests, I have some concerns about your cognitive function. What kind of concerns? Robert asked. Your wife's symptoms align with the early stages of dementia. Short-term memory loss, confusion about time, difficulty recalling recent events. Are you certain? Robert looked pained. Further tests are needed to confirm the diagnosis, Mendonca continued. But I strongly recommend beginning to consider specialized care options. Such as what? Mark asked, feigning surprise. There are many excellent elder care centers, specifically for dementia patients, where she can be monitored around the clock. Doctor, I interjected, isn't there any medication that can help? At this stage, medications have very limited effect. The most important thing is ensuring your safety and your husband's. At this stage, according to this fraud, after just 30 minutes and a fake video, I suddenly had advanced dementia. How fast does it usually progress? Jessica asked, feigning concern. In cases like this, decline can be rapid, just weeks or months. That's why immediate action is necessary. I understand, Mark said. Can you recommend a specific center? I work closely with a few facilities. I can make a referral. And legally? Jessica asked. Do we need any paperwork to protect her interests? That was the real question they wanted answered. In confirmed dementia cases, a legal power of attorney should be established so a family member can manage her finances and medical care, Mendonca replied. Can you provide the necessary medical documentation? Mark pressed. Of course. I can prepare a detailed report on Mrs. Sandra's mental condition. Exactly what they wanted. A fake diagnosis to seize control of my assets and lock me away. Doctor. Robert spoke up. I want a second opinion. Mendonca stiffened slightly. Of course, that is your right. But I must warn you, every day without proper treatment is another day lost. Whom would you suggest we see for another opinion? Robert asked. Mendonca gave 2 names, likely bribed as well, or at the very least ready to confirm his diagnosis without asking any uncomfortable questions. We left the clinic with a new appointment for the following week and a list of specialized care centers that Mendonca personally recommended. In the elevator, Mark and Jessica exchanged triumphant glances. They believed their plan was unfolding perfectly, but they didn't know that in my purse, the recorder had captured the entire appointment, including their questions about legal documents and Mendonca's blatant transactional tone. I had recorded the corrupt doctor. Now, I just needed the lab results to complete my evidence. Justice was very close. That afternoon, while Robert was napping, still trying to digest the shock of the diagnosis, I received a call that changed everything. Mrs. Sandra, we're calling from the independent forensic lab. We have the results of your sample. My heart pounded. What did you find? The substance you brought in contains lorazepam at a significant level. It's a sedative. At the dosage we detected, it can cause confusion, temporary memory loss, and drowsiness. Lorazepam. They had been drugging me with a psychotropic, perfectly explaining the symptoms they were staging. Is it dangerous? Is it dangerous? At this level, not lethal, but it definitely affects behavior and cognition. Do you want us to prepare a formal report? Yes, please. As detailed as possible. The report will be ready tomorrow morning after 10 o'clock. I hung up with trembling hands this time, from emotion, not fear. I finally had scientific proof that they were systematically drugging me. On Thursday morning, Mark called early. Mom, how are you feeling after yesterday's appointment? Confused, I admitted. And it wasn't entirely a lie. The doctor said some very concerning things. I know, Mom. It's hard to accept. But Jessica and I looked into some of the centers Dr. Mendonca recommended. There's a really good one near our house. Of course, someplace they could conveniently visit to make sure I stayed drugged and silenced. Can you come for lunch on Sunday? We'll talk it over with you and Dad. Will Lily be there? Iggy, will Lily be there? Of course. You know how much she loves seeing you. Poor child. Having to witness another attempt at poisoning. But this time, I was ready. All right, son. Sunday it is. After hanging up, I went straight to the lab to collect the official report. The technician handed me a sealed envelope. Mrs. Sandra, she said softly. I'm not supposed to give advice, but if someone is drugging you without consent, you should report it to the authorities. I already am, I assured her. My next stop was Attorney Charles Rivera's office. He read the report with a grave face. Sandra, this is solid evidence of poisoning. Combined with the recording from the clinic, you have a very strong case. What should I do next? We need more proof of the conspiracy. If you can record Mark and Jessica admitting to drugging you, we'll have everything we need for a criminal case. They're coming again on Sunday. They'll definitely try to drug me again. Charles leaned forward. It's prize. It is everything. Sandra, what I'm about to propose is risky, but it may give us the final piece of evidence we need. He explained his plan. Dangerous, but the only way to catch Mark and Jessica in the act. Sunday came, gray and cold. Mark, Jessica, and Lily arrived promptly at 12 o'clock, following their usual routine. But this time, I had prepared 3 recorders hidden in different places. One in my purse, one taped under the dining table, and one in the kitchen. How are you feeling today, Mom? Mark asked, while Jessica headed straight to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Better, Sandra answered clearly. I saw Mark exchange a worried look with Jessica. A lucid day for me wasn't part of their plan. Lily came close, whispering in my ear. Grandma, did you get my note? Yes, sweetheart. I whispered back. Everything will be all right. During lunch, I watched every movement carefully. Jessica poured water from a separate pitcher, filling only my glass. Everyone else drank from another. Mom, Mark said while we were eating. Jessica and I have been thinking about what Dr. Mendonca said. We believe it would be better if you started considering moving to a place that could take better care of you. I took a sip of water and immediately recognized the familiar bitter taste. You mean a nursing home? Don't call it that, Mom. It's a specialized care center. A beautiful place where you can make friends your age and receive professional medical care. What about Robert? I asked. Dad can visit any time. So can we. Lily could even see you more often. All sugar-coated lies, spoken in that same fake sweet tone. When would I have to move? I asked, pretending to consider it. Soon, Jessica answered. Doctor, Mendonca said your condition could worsen quickly. And what about the house? The very question they'd been waiting for. We'd have to sell the house to pay for the center. It's very expensive, Mom, Mark said, feigning discomfort. Sell the house? Robert was stunned. Mark, this is our home. Dad, you have to be realistic. Mom will need lifelong care. Good centers cost between $15,000 and $20,000 a month. Exaggerated numbers, but convincing to someone who hadn't researched it. Besides, Jessica chimed in, this house is too big for just you. You could move into a smaller apartment, still comfortable, and there'd be money left over for Mom's care. They had planned everything down to the last detail. They would separate me and Robert, sell the house, and pocket most of the money after paying for a few months in some cheap facility. I don't know. Robert whispered. This is all so sudden. Dad, Mark said impatiently. We can't delay. What if Mom has another episode? What if she falls or gets lost? Lily sat silently, but I saw her eyes brimming with tears. My brave granddaughter understood exactly what her parents were doing to me. Maybe we should ask a lawyer, Robert suggested. A lawyer? Mark instantly tensed. Why? We don't need a lawyer. To make sure we're protecting Mom's rights and doing everything properly. Dad, we just want to help, Jessica said sweetly. A lawyer will only make things more complicated. That's right, Mark added. Besides, Mom isn't mentally fit enough to handle complex legal matters anymore. Dr. Mendonca made that very clear. I knew the time had come. I needed them to say something concrete. Mark, I said, letting my voice waver. Why do I feel so exhausted after every lunch with you two? Mark and Jessica exchanged a quick glance, but it revealed more than they intended. That's just your illness, Mom, Mark answered carefully. But on other days, I feel perfectly fine. Only after eating here do I feel strange. Jessica's unease was obvious. Sandra, it's normal to feel more tired after social interaction. That's part of the illness. But why only here? I pressed. Why doesn't it happen when I'm home with Robert? Mom, you're getting confused again, Mark said, his voice carrying a warning edge. This was the decisive moment. I had to take the risk. Is there something in the food? In the water? I asked directly. The silence that followed shook the entire room. Mark and Jessica stared at me, stunned, clearly not expecting me to confront them so bluntly. Robert sat up straight. Sandra, he said slowly, what exactly are you implying? I think someone is drugging me. The reaction was instant. Mark shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. What are you saying? We're your family. You're paranoid, Jessica added, though her voice trembled. Lily looked at me with wide, frightened eyes, terrified by the tension exploding around us. Robert, I continued, the water I drank today had the same bitter taste as last week. Only my glass. No one else drank from the same pitcher. Robert looked at the two pitchers on the table, realizing for the first time that they were indeed different. Mark, he said slowly, why are there two different pitchers of water? The trap had been sprung. Now, I just needed to wait for them to slip up. For the recorder to capture the proof. The silence that followed was tense as the eye of a storm. I saw Mark and Jessica calculating, deciding whether to keep denying or change tactics. Dad, Mark finally said, trying to keep his voice steady, but it trembled slightly. Mom is having another delusional episode. Dr. Mendonca already warned us about this. A delusional episode? I repeated, pretending confusion, but holding firm. Robert, drink from my glass. Robert reached for it, but Jessica immediately stood up and snatched it away. No, Robert, Jessica said with a strained smile. Sandra drank from that glass. If she has an infection or virus, you could catch it. A lie too quick. But that reaction was exactly what I needed. Since when do you care about my health, Jessica? I asked flatly. Her fake smile vanished for a split second, revealing the coldness beneath. I've always cared about this family, Sandra. By wanting to lock me in a nursing home and sell my house? Mom! Mark shouted, finally losing his temper. Enough! You're sick. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I stood up. My moment had come. I know you've been drugging me for weeks. I know you've been planning to declare me incompetent. And I know Dr. Mendonca is a fraud you paid off to sign a fake diagnosis. Robert stared at me in shock. But in his eyes, I saw recognition flicker. My husband was a smart man, The pieces were starting to fit together. Sandra, Robert said slowly, are you sure about what you're saying? Absolutely sure. Mark turned to his father. Dad, don't you see? Mom's delusional. Dr. Mendonca said this happens in late-stage dementia patients. But then, Lily, my brave granddaughter, spoke up. She's not delusional, she said softly but firmly. I heard it. All of us turned to look at her. Mark and Jessica went pale. What did you hear, sweetheart? I asked gently. I heard Mom and Dad talking in the kitchen last week, Lily said, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom told Dad it was time to give Grandma more medicine to make her even more confused. The room fell into absolute silence. Mark and Jessica looked at their daughter in horror, not because the plan was exposed, but because she had betrayed them. Lily, you're mistaken, Jessica said, her voice trembling. You didn't understand what you heard. Yes, I did, Lily insisted, stronger now. You said the doctor would give you papers to take Grandma's house. You said she'd be better off somewhere she wouldn't bother you anymore. Robert stood up slowly, his face shifting from confusion to anger. Mark, what in the hell is going on here? Dad, Lily is just a kid. She doesn't understand. Enough! Robert roared. I had never seen him so furious. You've been drugging your mother. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again like a stranded fish. Jessica jumped in. Robert, Sandra is very sick. Sometimes we have to give her medicine to calm her down. For her own good. Medicine? What kind? Robert, just something mild, to ease her anxiety. No prescription, I cut in. No consent from me, and no knowledge from Robert, because you knew he'd never agree. You two are too stubborn to admit Sandra needs help, so we had to do it. Jessica screamed, finally losing control. It's the only way. Mark shouted too. You would never listen to us. Mom would never willingly move. That was the confession I needed. So you admit you've been drugging me? I asked calmly. Mark realized too late what he had just said. I didn't mean. You said exactly what you meant. I cut him off. You poisoned me to make me look confused. You bought off a corrupt doctor so he'd diagnose me with dementia. All of it just to steal my house. That's not stealing, Jessica screamed. It's our inheritance. It was going to be ours sooner or later. After I'm dead, I replied coldly. But you didn't want to wait that long. Robert stepped toward Mark, and for a moment I thought he might hit him. Get out of my house, Robert said in a voice I'd never heard from him before. Get out now. And don't ever come back. Dad, you don't understand. Out! Robert roared, before I call the police. The police? Jessica gave a shaky laugh. For what? We didn't do anything illegal. I took out my phone and held the screen up for them to see. Drugging without consent. Medical fraud. Elder abuse. All recorded, straight from your own mouths. Mark and Jessica's faces twisted as they realized how badly they'd miscalculated. I also have the lab results for the lorazepam you put in my water, I continued. And the recording at Dr. Mendonca's office where you talked about legal papers to seize my assets. Mark collapsed into a chair, finally understanding they'd lost. Mom, you just wanted to steal from me. I cut him off. And you were willing to destroy my mind to do it. Jessica still tried one last move. Sandra, if you turn us in, what will happen to Lily? Do you want her growing up in chaos? It was her last-ditch effort using Lily as a shield. But my brave granddaughter stepped forward and took my hand. Grandma, she said firmly. Do whatever you need to do. I love you. But what they did is wrong. In that moment, I knew I'd raised a good child, no matter who her parents were. Robert, I said calmly. Call the police. Wait, Mark shouted, leaping up. We can work this out. We'll leave. We'll never come back. We'll forget everything. Forget? How were you planning to make me forget? By drugging me until I didn't even remember my own name. Mom, please. I'm not your mother, I said icily. My son died the day he decided to poison his own mother. Robert had already dialed emergency services. Mark and Jessica looked at each other in despair, knowing there was no escape. Police, what's your emergency? Came the dispatcher's voice. I'd like to report a case of poisoning and fraud targeting an elderly person, Robert said firmly. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. But I also knew this was only the beginning. The hardest part was still ahead. Rebuilding my life without the son I'd lost, and making sure Lily would be protected from parents who had been willing to do anything for money. The police arrived after 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. During that time, Mark and Jessica alternated between desperate pleas and veiled threats. Lily sat beside me, gripping my hand like I was her anchor in the storm. Grandma, she whispered as we waited. Will they take my parents away? Maybe, sweetheart, I answered honestly. What they did is very serious. Then where will I live? The question I dreaded. I don't know yet, but I promise we'll make sure you're safe and have everything you need. The officers were professional and careful. Detective Peter Simmons, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, took my statement while his partner, Officer Carla Johnson, interviewed Robert separately. Mrs. Sandra, Detective Simmons said, I understand you have evidence showing you were systematically poisoned. I handed him everything. The lab report, the recordings, the screenshots about Dr. Mendonca, and Lily's testimony. He examined each piece closely. Very thorough, he remarked. Have you been working with an attorney to collect all this? Yes, attorney Carlos Rivera. He helped me understand what evidence I'd need. Very smart. Most victims of elder abuse aren't lucid enough to document things this carefully. Meanwhile, from the next room, I could hear Mark and Jessica arguing with Officer Carla Johnson, of course denying everything, insisting that I was delusional because of dementia. Will they question Dr. Mendonca? I asked. Absolutely. If what you're saying is true, he'll also be facing charges of medical fraud and conspiracy. Lily was interviewed an hour later by a social worker who specializes in children. She repeated her testimony clearly and bravely, making me incredibly proud. When the interviews ended, Detective Peter Simmons returned to the room where we were all waiting. Mark Davis and Jessica Davis, he announced formally. You are under arrest for non-consensual poisoning, conspiracy to defraud, and elder abuse. The sound of handcuffs clicked as they closed around Mark's wrists. Jessica burst into tears, but they weren't tears of remorse, they were self-pity. This is ridiculous, Mark shouted as he was led out the door. My mother is sick. This is all delusion. Mark, I said calmly, save your strength. You'll need it for the trial ahead. That was the last time I spoke to him as my son. After Mark and Jessica were taken away, the social worker sat down with Robert, me, and Lily to discuss my granddaughter's situation. Normally, in cases like this, the child is temporarily placed in the family services system until long-term custody can be determined, she explained. Her name was Rosa Miller. A young woman. Can she stay with us? Robert asked immediately. She can, but we need a full assessment of your household and your capacity to care for a young child, especially considering your ages and the recent trauma. We can absolutely care for Lily, I cut in firmly. She's been through enough pain. Taking her away from us now would be cruel. I understand, but I also have to consider what's best for Lily, long term. What do you mean? Robert asked tensely. You're both 66 and 70. Raising an 8-year-old girl is a huge responsibility. My granddaughter just saved my life, risking her own, I said firmly. She's shown more courage and integrity than many adults 3 times her age. I won't let the system punish her for doing the right thing. Lily squeezed my hand tightly. I want to stay with Grandma Sandra and Grandpa Robert. What you want matters a lot, Lily, Rosa replied. But I also have to make sure you're in the best possible environment. Robert spoke up to settle it. Miss Miller, we respect your work and understand you need to protect Lily. But please let us prove we're the best choice for her. Let her stay with us temporarily while you do your evaluation. Rosa thought for a moment, then nodded. I can arrange temporary custody for 30 days, during which I'll visit weekly, and Lily must continue therapy to process what happened. Of course. We agree, I answered immediately. We'll do whatever is necessary. After Rosa left, the 3 of us sat in the living room, silent from everything that had just happened. The house seemed different, like it had been cleansed of an invisible poison. Grandma, Lily spoke up after a while. Are you sad about what happened to my parents? It was a complicated question, deserving an honest answer. I'm sad for the son I thought I had, I answered carefully. I'm sad that Mark made decisions that destroyed this family. But I'm not sad that we're safe now. I ruined the family too by telling their secret. My heart clenched. She was blaming herself for her parents' crimes. Lily, look at me, I said, cupping her small face. You didn't ruin anything. You saved all of us. You're the only one who was brave in this whole situation. But now my parents will go to jail. Your parents are going to jail because they made terrible choices, because they chose to hurt the people they loved for money. That's not your fault, Robert added. That's right, Lily. Sometimes adults do very wrong things. When that happens, they have to face the consequences. But you did exactly the right thing. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in the living room, we'd turned into her temporary bedroom. Robert and I sat on the bed, talking about everything that had just happened. Sandra, Robert said, when Mark told me you were losing your memory, there were moments I doubted. I know, I replied, taking his hand. That was part of their plan to make even you doubt me. I hate myself for that. Don't blame yourself. They were very manipulative, but I know you better than anyone. In the end, I believed you. You ask how I knew I had to collect evidence? Because I knew no one would believe just my words. A mother accusing her own son of poisoning her. It would sound like nothing more than the delusions of old age, wouldn't it? Robert nodded sadly. So what happens now? Now we rebuild, we heal, and we make sure Lily grows up knowing that you must always do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. And Mark? That was the hardest question. Mark made his choice. Now he has to live with the consequences. That night, I slept better than I had in months. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. Justice had come. More importantly, my true family, the ones who loved me sincerely, were safe. 6 months later, I sat in my garden watching Lily play with the little dog Robert gave her for her 9th birthday. The afternoon sun stretched shadows across the flowers we planted together in spring. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep peace. The trial had ended 3 weeks earlier. Mark was sentenced to 2 years in prison for poisoning and conspiracy to defraud. Jessica got 18 months for being an accomplice. Dr. Mendonca lost his medical license and was fined $100,000 for medical fraud. Not enough. My lawyer, Carlos Rivera, said after hearing the sentence. What matters isn't the punishment, it's that they can't hurt me or anyone else again. Lily had stayed with us through it all. Rosa Miller's assessment was thorough but fair, and she finally confirmed that Robert and I were the best environment for Lily. Last month, temporary custody officially became permanent custody. Lily shouted from the yard. "Look what Max can do!" The golden-haired dog had learned to shake hands, and my granddaughter beamed with pride. Over the past months, she had transformed from a frightened, guilty child into a lively, confident little girl. "Well done, sweetheart," I said with a smile. "Come on in, let's get dinner ready." Robert came home from work a little while later. At 70, he'd taken a part-time job at the hardware store to keep himself busy, he said. But I knew it was also to make sure we had enough income to raise Lily. "How was school today?" he asked as he washed his hands. "I got an A in math," Lily said proudly. "And my teacher said my essay about a hero was the best in the class." "Who did you write about?" I asked, though I already knew. "About you, Grandma. I wrote that you're the bravest person I've ever known." My heart overflowed with emotion. This extraordinary child had turned the most painful betrayal of my life into something beautiful. At dinner, Lily chattered about her friends at school, about an upcoming play, about a science project she wanted to do on medicinal plants. Her life was once again filled with the normal, wonderful things every 9-year-old girl deserves. "Grandma," she said as we washed dishes together, "do you ever miss Dad, Mark?" It was a question she still asks sometimes, and I always answered as honestly as I could. "I miss the Mark he was when he was your age," I said. "I miss the boy who used to play in this garden, who used to help me cook in the kitchen. But that Mark has been gone a long time." "Do you think Dad will ever come back?" "I don't know, sweetheart. People can change, but only if they want to and accept the consequences of what they've done." I wasn't ready to hear apologies or excuses. Maybe one day, but not now. Jessica had tried several times through her lawyer to get permission to see Lily, but every request was denied by the court. A woman who once tried to poison an old woman to steal her house could never be trusted near a child. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the living room we had turned into her bedroom, Robert and I sat on the porch with cups of tea, as we had for decades. "Do you ever regret fighting back?" Robert asked. "Never," I answered immediately. "If I hadn't fought, I'd be in a nursing home right now, drugged into confusion, while they lived in our house. And Lily would be growing up with parents teaching her that hurting family for money is normal." "You're very brave, Sandra." "No, I was very afraid. But bravery isn't the absence of fear. Bravery is doing what must be done, even while you're afraid." Robert took my hand, the same hand he'd held 45 years ago on our wedding day. "What do you think the future holds?" I looked toward Lily's window, where the nightlight cast a soft glow against the pink curtains. "I think we'll watch an extraordinary little girl grow up. We'll teach her that real family isn't about blood, but about those who love you unconditionally. We'll teach her that doing the right thing is never easy, but always worth it. And we'll grow old together in this house, surrounded by real love. We'll see Lily graduate, go to college, maybe even get married one day. We'll be the grandparents she deserves." "That sounds perfect." "It'll never be perfect." I smiled. "There will still be challenges. Raising a little girl at our age will never be easy. There will be times when she misses her parents, times when she asks questions I won't know how to answer. But it will be real. It will be honest. It will be true love." That night, before sleeping, I wrote in my journal the words that summed up everything I had learned. Today marks 6 months since I discovered my own son was willing to destroy my mind just to steal this house. 6 months since I learned that family does not always mean blood, and that real love sometimes requires painful decisions. My granddaughter, Lily, has taught me that courage does not come from age or size, but from the heart. She has taught me that doing the right thing is more important than keeping a false peace. She has taught me that sometimes To save someone, you must risk everything. Mark made his choice. He chose money over love, greed over family, betrayal over honesty. Now he must live with the consequences. I, too, made my choice. I chose to fight for my dignity, for my home, for my future. I chose to protect an innocent child, the one who first found the courage to protect me. I regret nothing. Tomorrow, I will wake up in my own bed, in my own house, with a clear mind and a peaceful heart. I will have breakfast with Robert and Lily, help her with homework, work in the garden. I will live a simple but honest life, surrounded by true love. At 66, I have learned this. It is never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to demand respect. Never too late to choose dignity over comfort. And most importantly, it is never too late to start again. I closed the journal and looked up at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of home. Robert's steady breathing beside me, Lily's small body stirring softly in her room, the clock ticking in the living room. These were the sounds of a real family, of a home built on love and respect. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully, knowing I had won the most important battle of my life, the battle for my own dignity. And by winning that battle, I not only saved my future, but also the future of my extraordinary granddaughter. Justice had come, and with it, true happiness. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me with a donation. That way, I can write more stories like this one. Thank you sincerely. And you, if you were in my place, what would you have done? I truly want to hear your thoughts. Please share them in the comments. If you'd like to hear more life stories like this, make sure to like the video and follow the channel. There are many more stories waiting for you. A big hug, and see you next time. At the end of this story, perhaps the clearest truth is this: family is not always about blood. Real family is found where there is love, respect, and the courage to protect one another. Sandra lost a son, but she found a greater strength in the love of her husband and her granddaughter. And from this, we see that sometimes standing up for yourself not only saves you, but also the ones you love. Each story like this is a reminder. Living with integrity may be hard, but it is the only choice if you want lasting peace. I believe that in every family, each of us has faced difficult choices between love, trust, and betrayal. And what about you? If you were in Sandra's place, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep a fragile peace, or would you stand up to protect your dignity and what truly matters? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your answer may be the lesson someone else needs to hear. If you'd like to join me in hearing more stories about family, love, and the deep lessons of life, follow this channel so we don't miss this journey together. Because here, every story is not just to listen to, but to reflect on and grow from.